We have got one question for you, Graham, that's come in. Is there any new improvements of technology for weather forecast predictions?
Yeah, I suppose the best way to answer that is the technology is improving all the time. When I first joined the Bureau of Meteorology, I mean, we really had satellites and balloon flights. So I used to do the balloon flights. So we'd put a foil target at the base of a balloon, release it through the atmosphere. From that, we could work out what the wind speed and direction was. That was done in around about 35 field stations across Australia at the same time. So that's how they got a profile of the atmosphere. One today, we also attached a small radio sonde that measured the pressure, the temperature, the humidity, as well as giving us the wind information. These days, satellites do all that. And there are thousands of satellites doing it. Ships, aircraft, they all provide weather information on takeoff, on landing, and the amount of information coming into the forecast models is just phenomenal, and that improves the forecasts and also our understanding of climate patterns. We're talking at the moment about the ENSO, the Indian Ocean Dipole, the Madden-Julian Oscillation and the Southern Annular Mode. And we're going to add more into that as time goes on, as there is more understanding how they interact with each other and how other systems interact. We know there are other systems, but at this stage, it's just not 100% certain where they fit into the picture and who controls who. So there's so much more information coming. But we're living in a technological world, and it should really improve forecasting.
Yes, well, Graham, we've had a really positive comment here. It's apparently showering along the range in the Upper Hunter, showers coming in from north and west. So you've predicted it right on cue, mate. So already,
good to hear.
Already being positive. While you're there, another question: why don't they change the way they display forecasts if so many people misread them?
Look, I suppose it's like any big corporation. They used to talk like isolated. I forget the terms now because they don't use them anymore. So they used to have different terminology. And I suppose the key thing is that in weather, everything has a meaning, and which we've just shown with that forecast. Each of those figures, there is a meaning behind that. And that is all on the Bureau of Meteorology website. It's just a matter of finding it. And that's the key thing, I suppose. It comes down to being able to provide that information to everyone. I suppose a lot of the time we put stuff out there and we just expect that people have a certain understanding of it, but it's just never the case. So I suppose that's what I'm trying to do now is filling people with what some stuff actually means. And that is one area of the forecast that is highly misunderstood.
Thanks, Graham. Matthew, we've got a couple of questions here for you. Does going to my doctor mean I have to take medication?
This is a bit of a common misconception that we find. A lot of the time people are often wary to go to their doctor because they just expect that their doctor's going to give them a box of happy pills and send them on their way. Now, that's not always the case. Medication does have a place when it comes to mental health, but just seeing a doctor and telling them about what's going on will not immediately mean that you have to start taking medication. Often doctors want to prevent people from going unnecessarily on medication, so they will often refer you on to another service who can help you manage that situation without the need for medication. If the doctor determines that medication might be necessary down the track, they'll also have that conversation with you. They'll make sure that you're informed about what you'll take and what the effect will be, and hopefully you can work together on a suitable plan to make sure that you generally pull through and can get to a place where you're back on track and back on your feet quickly.
Another one, Matthew. What can I do to help a friend that seems stressed?
I covered a number of tips that you might start to see in yourself, but there are also things that you might see in other people as well if they're stressed. You might notice that they're knocking back the opportunity to go downtown to the pub or come over for a barbie. These are things that will let us know that someone's okay. You might see that they're teary more often or angry more often than they normally would be. So when it comes to approaching a person or when you're worried about someone having a conversation with them, there's a few things that you can do to make sure that that conversation will go smoothly. First of all, make sure that you've got the right time and place to have a chat with them. That means a one-on-one setting where it's private and you're not going to be interrupted by anyone, and that you've also got the time to have a conversation in case you ask them what's going on and they decide to tell you the whole story. You need to make sure that you've got the time to sit down with them and let them speak to you about what's going on for them. The second thing that you can do is just honestly share with them what you've noticed about themselves, about the changes that you've seen, and ask them, is everything okay? Now, a person might take two options here. They might embrace the opportunity to have a conversation with you about what's going on, especially if things aren't okay, or they might tell you that everything's going all right and that you don't need to worry about them. Now, that can be okay in the first instance. If they tell you that everything's okay, you might have planted a seed with them. They might self-reflect and they might work on some ways to get themselves better. But if things haven't changed after a few weeks, it might be worth having that conversation again with them as well. Now, if they've taken the opportunity to have a chat with you about what's going on for them, the best thing that we can do is try to avoid any sort of judgment or any type of story sharing. What we want to do is allow that person to talk fully about what's happening for them. And that doesn't mean that you're sitting there thinking about situations that you want to share with them where you felt the same way. This is their space and their time. Let them have a chat. And lastly, the best thing that you can do is support them to get help. Let them know that they're okay and that they are supported, and that, again, offer the advice. There's places that they can go to for help in person or online or on the telephone. And if you're the right person, you can be happy to support them to go to a GP. You can help them make an appointment. You can sit with them in the waiting room. Or you could just simply provide them with a flyer of places or numbers that they can go to for help. So there are a few ways that you can help a person if you're worried about them. It's just about plucking up the courage to have that conversation with them.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. On a positive note, just a final question for you. Someone said, I love your decision worksheet as it keeps the process simple. Do you recommend keeping these things on hand so you can reflect later on what your drivers were at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. When we sat down to create this decision-making worksheet, simplicity really was the base of what we wanted to achieve. We wanted to make sure that the process was really easy to flow through and that it was something that a person could do again and again and again. Now, as I mentioned, you can jump on our website and print off however many of those sheets that you want and use them, keep them on hand to make decisions in the future. And that doesn't have to just be big decisions. It could be simple decisions as well. Eventually, what I'd expect is that all you'd need would be a blank bit of paper or, a bent up corner of a newspaper where you could sit down and jot a few words down around the decision-making process because you'd be that good at it. That's where we'd like everyone to aim for.
Thanks, Matthew. Graham, we've got a last question for you too. Probably a bit of a revision, but how accurate are the climate outlooks?
Okay, so it depends on the season and the location. Some years they're spot on. Other years there's quite big variations as to what was expected and what occurred. And I suppose some of the difficulty around that is you can have some years where you have an El Nino, but some areas get flooding, whereas you can have a La Nina and some areas will still be in drought. Perhaps a classic example of that was 2017, 2018 in summer. There was a La Nina technically, but it was only ocean based. The atmosphere never coupled with it. So we never really saw widespread rainfall. Some areas, particularly parts of Queensland, saw worthwhile rain, but other areas of the country saw very dry conditions. So each season will vary, and often some of the forecast, the outlook models don't necessarily pick up those small variations all that well, but the accuracy is actually on the models themselves. A lot of the time of the year, so as you're moving through the latter part of winter into spring, highly accurate through many areas of the country. But yeah, there are variations to that. And you also have to consider that you could have an outlook. I suppose a classic example is July. The expectations back from February were that July was probably going to record above average rainfall for much of the continent. Unfortunately, southern annular mode had some different ideas on that, so we've seen it kick in and really reduce the potential of rainfall with cold fronts across the southeast. The Indian Ocean dipole, there was a bit of cyclone activity, so that cooled off a little bit. It's still expected to warm up again, so you can see these localised variations that have a really big impact in areas of the continent, even though they're thousands of kilometres away where that element occurs. But I would suggest that in the outlooks themselves, they do state exactly what the reliability and the accuracy of that forecast is. So it is worth checking that.
Okay, well, thanks Graham. That closes our forum for today. I think we've had a really good session with two great speakers. Thank you for your time and for being freely available.